Okay. Yeah, I've gotten over my flu mostly that I had last time. I was still coughing when I made that last video. I guess I'm just making videos to practice making videos and get used to them. But I did have some things that I want to talk about. It's just that it seems kind of pointless to have a video that just shows me just talking. I don't usually like to listen to videos because my headphones don't work on my laptop, and headphones make me have this kind of temporary hearing loss anyway, so I don't really understand the point of making a video of me just talking. But I'll do it. Yeah, about land ownership. That's one of the things that I've been thinking about for the past few years. I can't entirely call myself a libertarian nowadays for a lot of reasons, and I feel that the libertarians are avoiding certain topics that I think are very important, or maybe just briefly mentioning those topics, such as land ownership, and saying that, oh, that'll all be fixed, we just have to not let the government own land, and that fixes the problem. I mean, I kind of agree with that, but I want a much deeper discussion of it than that. I'm kind of self-conscious because I'm talking really loudly to the camera because I don't have a microphone. And I know, like, if anyone is outside, they can hear me shouting loudly inside my trailer. So, but it's very hard to express what it is that I think about land ownership. I don't really know enough about it to feel that I could argue convincingly against it. I can imagine libertarians arguing back at me, and I'm not really able to fight back against them at this point in time with really strong counter arguments that I feel confident about. I have done a little bit of reading. Basically, I just Googled land ownership is wrong, and I didn't put that in quotes. And I got a lot of good essays on some websites. There were also some really annoying forum discussions with trolls that were strongly in favor of land ownership, and this might qualify as an ad hominem attack, an at the man attack, but the people that were making those very strongly in favor of land ownership arguments, those pro-ownership arguments, were also people who had other opinions that I really thought were very bad. Like, one of the people that was strongly in favor of land ownership was also saying that we ought to have an artificial intelligence making all the decisions for society because we humans aren't smart enough to make good decisions on behalf of everyone. And I could possibly be quoting that a little bit wrong. I got the impression he wasn't just playing devil's advocate or saying something to make a point. From what he said, I got the impression he really felt that way. So there's just an association between a lot of things that are really evil and land ownership. And that makes me think that land ownership is an agenda to accomplish something evil. I can talk about the effects that it has, and then assume that people are deliberately achieving those effects. That somebody is deliberately achieving those effects by their intention. Because it's just kind of hard for me to think that way. There's just so much stuff. I haven't really put it all together yet. It's easier for me to tell the history of how I began to suspect that land ownership was a major problem. Obviously, my own personal experience was what started it, finding out that it's really hard to pay the rent. And I have some chronic and recurring health problems. I'm going through a pretty good phase right now because I have figured out a lot of what triggers my problems. But in the past, I went through phases where I was sick and unemployed for a long time and had a hard time getting a job and couldn't pay the rent and had to get financial help and was getting help from my parents. And yeah, I still am actually getting help from my parents financially. But I think it shouldn't be so hard to pay the rent. So that's personal experience that a lot of people would relate to. But people think that's just the way it is. You have to get used to it. They don't think of it as something bad that shouldn't be that way, that needs to be fixed. They're just like, oh well, it's up to you to struggle as hard as you can to pay your rent, and if you don't, you're a failure, and that's your fault. I don't think that way anymore. I don't know how much time I'm at. I'm trying to keep it under 10 minutes. Weston Price, the author, Weston Price, who wrote Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, was one of the things that book was one of the things that really began to convince me that there was something wrong with modern society and land ownership. And I had already been going that direction anyway. But that book was like the last straw, the nail in the coffin. It was tons of evidence that primitive people living in primitive hunter-gatherer societies or traditional subsistence farming cultures were living much, much healthier lives. Their bodies were physically healthy. Their bodies developed properly. Like, I have the narrowing of the face, the small dental arch with the crooked teeth. I had braces. I had everything that Weston Price talks about, that they observed, which only happens in modern society, and it doesn't happen in primitive hunter-gatherer societies. In primitive societies, their faces are bigger. They have a bigger mouth. They're physically healthier in every way. They don't get diabetes. They don't become obese. And if modern society is so great, why are we so much sicker than they are? That's something a lot of people have said, not just me. It's not just some new insight that I had. It's just part of the process of what I'm learning. And I'm just thinking of something like a quarry or a factory on a piece of unowned land that nobody has officially drawn a square around. And the rest of the land is woods, and you can hunt and gather in those woods. But then there's this factory that someone built on that land, and I'm just trying to understand whether this squaring off of everything and then paying someone for it is even necessary to have that factory in the woods image that I'm thinking of. Well, and I don't have a lot of time to express this, and it's also very weak. It's not very well formulated in my mind. But who owns the land? It all defaults back to some entity, a bank or a government or a real estate agency. Someone always owns the land. When you die, when you don't give it to your children, it should be unowned when you die and don't give it to anyone. It should not default to some immortal entity that always has all the land no matter what. And so that's government. That's what the government does. The government is the default owner of all the land. The other problem that I'm seeing, that again I need to reformulate this in my mind. I was reading about the no toll on our watershed protest at Penn State, where some people were building and are successfully going to build an apartment complex on a protected watershed area. And I was reading a PDF file, which I don't know where it is. I don't know if I could find it again. There was a lady who was very involved with this protest, and she wrote and was speaking about it, and she said, Penn State has special legal privileges that are beyond just ordinary individual people. It is allowed to do things that individuals aren't allowed to do legally, in terms of how it purchases land and how much land it can purchase. And I don't remember the details of that either. I can just imagine now a libertarian would want to say, well, we agree with you on that. We don't want corporations or universities to have special privileges that are above and beyond what individual people can do. But I still don't feel like I'm in agreement with most of the libertarians on that, because most of the libertarians, a lot of them, are still going to be very much in the homestead mentality, which I was reading about that recently, about the homesteading of the United States. You are given a piece of land, you're allowed to make it work using your own hard work. And that's the idea behind U.S. American land ownership. And a lot of the libertarians are in favor of that. And I'm saying no even to that. I don't see it that way. I see it as you just live there. You don't have someone making a square for you and then writing it down someplace and having you pay taxes on it and having it guarded by the government. There's something about that that's still wrong. To me, it's just you go and live there and there's nothing. Nobody does anything. You just live there, and then other people see that you live there and they just respect that you've built a house there, and they don't try to, I don't know, do something to your house. And they've built their own house on another piece of land and nobody did anything about it. Like, to me, that is how it should be. That is how territories get established, and your tribe, your family, your ancestry, the traditional way of seeing land ownership, how that gets established. Now, unfortunately, all this is very vague in my mind at this point in time, and I'm going to have to end it because I guess I've gone over 10 minutes. But that's just scratching the surface of what I'm trying to understand.